This statement here shows that you don't care about human health or safety. Why don't you? You claim to care enough about the unborn. Why aren't you talking about necessary precautions against COVID, instead of rebelling and making these ignorant speeches? Okay. Yeah.
Across the borders, they'd be tested. That's evidence of what a joke this is.
Yes, and it's about actually criminalizing American citizens. Meanwhile, the 2 million people that are illegally entering into our country, they could do whatever they want. So I want to ask you, Governor, there's another issue that I think is really important that we're not supposed to talk about that is kind of around this theme that you and I have been kind of going back and forth which is the problem with tolerance. Now, I want you to, you're not allowed to say this out loud, which is exactly why I want to say this, because you see all these ridiculous bumper stickers as if tolerance is the most important value. No, we shouldn't tolerate evil things.
I was going to ask what his examples of evil are and how they are evil, but sports? Define evil and how is that evil? This is obviously about transgenders, but that would simply be a fairness issue, would it not? Of course, nobody has ever provided me with the definition of evil yet, so I can't really say.
For example, we shouldn't tolerate men in women's sports. Like, why is this even a question?
I know.
Right? And so,
Maybe
tolerance
answering
and
the wrong
apathy
questions.
are attributes of a dying society. And tolerance has been weakness for the American project the last 20 years. Now, what people mean by tolerance is they mean...
So sports are the core of America's societal balance? Really?
Don't be mean to others. Like, okay, I obviously believe that. I think that we should be Christ-like, but Christ...
What does tolerance and religion have to do with politics, Charlie? What does any of this have to do with politics? If Jesus is tolerant, why does God judge anybody? And why do you approve of God judging anybody and eternal torment? I would ask why you tolerate God's way, but you want Christianity to be true and you worship this God, so you don't just tolerate God's way, you support and advocate it. What would evil be if God's way is good?
It was 100% grace on 100% truth. And this idea that we should be okay with the destruction of how God made man and God made woman, like...
How are transgenders destroying man? How is making a transition a form of destruction? What about wars, Charlie? Why aren't either of you ranting against war? What about corporations violating the environment through both pollution and illegal toxic chemical dumping? No, you are worried about transgenders in sports.
We shouldn't put up with this, and you have this person who I believe needs counseling and needs compassion and needs a pastor to guide him to kind of biological reality, who is basically destroying women swimming from the University of Pennsylvania. I don't know if you guys saw this story or not. This man who has some deep-seated mental problems, obviously, and no, I mean, I don't say that as a joke, by the way. I really hope he gets treatment. But, like, don't have your mental problems destroy women's sports.
I'm not hearing much evidence of your sanity or Sarah's here, Charlie.
For other people that don't have the same testosterone levels that you have. And that's the worst thing you could possibly do.
What does testosterone
And
level
so,
have to do with
Governor,
mental health?
how do we save women's sports?
Yeah, and that's really important to me also. By the way, sports are and healthy competition. I mean, that's just a...
So women's sports is the crisis in the world?
By the way, at the pace we're going, we will tell our kids there used to be a thing called women's sports, just so we're clear. That is the pace that we are going. And part of it is that people are afraid of the names they're going to be called. They're afraid that they're going to be called transphobic, whatever that is, right? Actually, putting that aside, I do have a deep fear that the next generation...
You know what I do, Charlie? I either ignore that shit, or I call them out on it. I don't fucking whine on stage about it, in an attempt to use it to play victim or whitewash my position.
Is not going to
Somebody called me a
respect
name.
biological and God-given differences between men and women. We should all be afraid of that. In fact, we should be terrified of that.
So God is impotent, Charlie? You have to stand up for a God and demand everybody respect what you believe God has made and appointed? Who's being tolerant here, Charlie? Why is everybody obligated to take what you believe about God and accuse anybody of changing something, of disrespecting God? How is that disrespect, and why do you take offense to anything? Maybe God is wrong, if he is real. If disrespecting God is so fucking dangerous that you are questioning why none of these people are terrified, then why do you need to say anything? Why not just leave God to his devices? Why do you side with this deadly God?
And what this ends up creating in a lot of different ways is the most confused and miserable generation in American history, raised by a political correct regime that has been afraid to tell people things that are
I don't know, you guys are the ones who used to or still do call left-wingers snowflakes whenever they get upset. I know I've been called a snowflake a few times, and I'm not even on the left. I'm independent. But sounds like you're the one who's miserable, demoralizing and demonizing people who don't reflect your religious beliefs, while these people are doing something about their psychological disposition. They're miserable because they're rebelling against you conservatives fascistly preaching at them? Okay, stop it then, and I'm sure they'll stop rebelling against you.
biologically and metaphysically true,
Fucking
because for whatever reason they might have someone angrily comment on their Instagram post or their Facebook post. And you said it perfectly, Governor. We get the government that we tolerate. And we've kind of had this idea that we can kind of just sit idly by and like, oh yeah, I might not agree with that, but as long as it doesn't impact me. Well, it's impacting all of you now. Is that same sort of like, well, it doesn't mean anything if they go into a restroom. Let me tell you a real story, and I'd love to get your comments on this, Governor. Like, what's the big deal with transgender bathrooms? How about you go to Loudoun County, Virginia, where you go look that father in the eye that got arrested at a school board meeting, try to complain about transgender bathrooms. They arrested him for doing that. Why was he there to complain? He was there to complain because his daughter got raped in the bathroom by a man who thought he was a woman.
So one person is guilty of a crime, therefore they all are? Generalizing much? Do Republican Congress people all have a clean record, Charlie?
And then they sent the young man to another school where he raped again. What we are experiencing, what's the takeaway of this? Is that if we don't draw definitive lines of what is good and what is evil, what is right, what is wrong, then the whole society really starts to fall apart. But it comes down to this. It's impossible under the current regime to do that without being called bad names. It's impossible to do that without getting some hate. But guess what? That matters a lot more than whether or not you're going to get a bunch of Instagram likes or that people are going to think really highly of you. And so, Governor, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I just love where you're going there with this encouragement for people to, regardless of what you're going to be called, again, taking that strong position. And it's just common sense anyway, man. It's not that difficult to take a stand on something like, how God created us, and DNA is not going to change just because you.
Well, the thing is, you guys don't listen when people tell you you're wrong. I agree about the name calling and insults and shit, but, when people express their dissent, are they really insulting you, or are you just saying that they're insulting you because they're right and you don't like that they're right? Because you know you're wrong in your stupid positions. They're your ideologies, your religious and your antisocial, conservative, and religious nonsense beliefs. You just can't handle it. You ever consider that you may be wrong, and you just argue with them. And you also straw man. You accuse them. I hear it all the time on Getter now. Marjorie Taylor Greene likes to call people. Well, they all like to call people a commie. What the fuck?